The rain pounded against the concrete walls of the animal shelter as Max pressed his massive frame against the cold metal bars. His amber eyes held a sadness that seemed to echo through the long hallway filled with abandoned animals. At 3 years old, the muscular Pitbull had already spent 18 months behind these bars, watching countless dogs come and go while he remained forgotten. Max's story began on the rough streets of downtown Detroit, where he wandered as a stray for months before animal control finally caught him. His coat was matted, his ribs visible through patchy fur, and trust was something he had learned to guard carefully. The shelter workers initially feared him, his powerful build and scarred muzzle telling a story of hardship that made potential adopters walk past his kennel without a second glance. Sarah Martinez had never planned to adopt a pit bull. The 34-year-old teacher from suburban Michigan had lost her golden retriever 6 months earlier and thought she was ready for another gentle, family-friendly companion. Her 7-year-old daughter Emma had been begging for a puppy, something small and cuddly that could sleep in her pink bedroom and play dress-up games. But fate works in mysterious ways. On that particular Saturday morning, Sarah had driven to 3 different shelters looking for the perfect small dog, only to find empty kennels and waiting lists. The 4th shelter was her last hope, and as she walked through the adoption area with Emma clinging to her hand, something made her stop at kennel number 47. Max lay curled in the corner, his broad head resting on his paws. Unlike the other dogs who barked and jumped at potential adopters, he simply lifted his eyes to meet Sarah's gaze. There was something in those amber depths that spoke to her heart, a quiet dignity that seemed to say he had given up hope but was still willing to try one more time. Emma tugged on her mother's sleeve, whispering that the big dog looked sad. Sarah read the information card attached to his kennel, learning that Max had been there longer than any other dog in the shelter. The staff had grown attached to him, describing him as gentle despite his intimidating appearance. But his breed and size made him nearly impossible to place in a home. The shelter volunteer, an elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, approached them with a knowing smile. She had worked with abandoned animals for over 20 years and could sense when a connection was forming. She told Sarah that Max had never shown aggression toward humans or other animals, but potential adopters were always frightened away by his appearance and reputation. As Mrs. Patterson opened the kennel door, Max slowly rose to his feet, his tail giving a cautious wag. He approached the gate with careful steps as if he had learned that sudden movements made people nervous. When Emma extended her small hand through the bars, Max gently sniffed her fingers before giving them the softest lick imaginable. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. This wasn't the small, fluffy companion she had envisioned, but something about Max's gentle demeanor despite his imposing presence told her that appearances could be deceiving. Emma giggled as Max's tongue tickled her palm, and for the first time in months, Sarah saw genuine joy light up her daughter's eyes. The adoption process took 3 hours of paperwork, background checks, and lengthy discussions about Pitbull ownership. The shelter required Sarah to attend a mandatory training session about the breed's needs and characteristics. They explained that Max would need patience, consistent training, and most importantly, a family willing to see past his exterior to the loving heart within. As they prepared to take Max home, Mrs. Patterson pulled Sarah aside with tears in her eyes. She explained that Max had been scheduled for euthanization twice, only to receive last-minute reprieves when volunteers couldn't bear to let him go. His time was running out, and Sarah's decision to adopt him had literally saved his life. The drive home was quiet except for Emma's excited chatter from the back seat. Max sat perfectly still in the car, his eyes fixed on the passing scenery as if he couldn't quite believe this was really happening. Sarah caught glimpses of him in the rearview mirror, noting how he seemed to be memorizing every detail of their journey, as if afraid it might all disappear like a dream. When they pulled into the driveway of their modest 2-story home, Max remained motionless until Sarah opened his door. He stepped out cautiously, his nose twitching as he took in the unfamiliar sense of suburban life. The small front yard with its white picket fence seemed like paradise compared to the concrete kennel he had called home for so long. Emma ran ahead to unlock the front door, calling for Max to follow her. But the big dog stayed close to Sarah's side, his eyes questioning whether he was truly welcome in this place that smelled of home-cooked meals and lavender fabric softener. Sarah gently placed her hand on his broad head, whispering that he was safe now, that this was his forever home. As they crossed the threshold together, Max paused in the entryway, his tail beginning to wag with growing confidence. The house was warm and filled with the kind of love he had only dreamed about during those long, lonely nights at the shelter. Little did Sarah know that she had just brought home not just a dog, but a guardian angel who would soon prove that the size of one's heart matters far more than the size of one's body. The first week in his new home tested every ounce of Max's self-control. Years of uncertainty had taught him to expect disappointment, so he moved through the house like a guest who might be asked to leave at any moment. He ate his meals quickly, always watching the door, and slept on the kitchen floor despite the comfortable dog bed Sarah had bought for him. Emma tried everything to make Max feel welcome. She offered him her favorite stuffed animals, shared bits of her sandwich when her mother wasn't looking, and read him stories from her picture books. But Max remained cautious, grateful but guarded, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday evening during Emma's bedtime routine. Sarah was tucking her daughter into bed when they heard a thunderstorm approaching. The first crack of lightning sent Max scrambling from his spot in the living room, his nails clicking frantically against the hardwood floors as he searched for somewhere to hide. Emma sat up in bed, her eyes wide with concern as another boom of thunder shook the house. She could hear Max whimpering downstairs, and without hesitation, she called out to him in her sweet 7-year-old voice. To Sarah's amazement, the sound of heavy paws climbing the stairs followed Emma's invitation. Max appeared in the doorway of Emma's pink bedroom, his massive frame filling the space as he trembled with each thunderclap. Emma patted her bed and whispered for him to come closer. For a moment, Max hesitated, looking between the little girl and Sarah as if asking for permission to accept this incredible offer of comfort. Sarah nodded her approval, and Max approached the bed with careful steps. Emma helped guide his front paws onto the mattress, and soon all 75 pounds of the gentle giant was curled up next to the tiny girl. His breathing began to steady as Emma stroked his fur, whispering that everything would be okay and that storms couldn't hurt him anymore. That night marked the beginning of an unbreakable bond. Max discovered that Emma's room smelled like strawberry shampoo and childhood dreams, and more importantly, it felt like the safest place on earth. When Sarah checked on them an hour later, she found Emma fast asleep with one small arm draped over Max's neck, while the big dog kept vigilant watch over his new little human. The next morning brought new challenges as Max struggled with separation anxiety when Sarah and Emma left for work and school. He had never experienced the routine of a loving family, and the fear of abandonment made him pace and whine whenever they prepared to leave. Sarah installed a camera to monitor him during the day, watching from her classroom as Max spent hours staring out the front window, waiting for their return. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, noticed a change in the usually quiet girl during those first weeks. Emma talked constantly about her new dog, drawing pictures of Max during art class and writing stories about their adventures together. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and soon the entire second-grade class was eager to hear updates about the gentle giant, who had found his way into the Martinez family. The real test of Max's character came when Emma invited her best friend Jessica over for a play date. Sarah held her breath as the two girls ran around the backyard, worried about how Max would react to another child in his territory. But her fears proved unfounded, as Max appointed himself the official playground supervisor, following the girls at a respectful distance and ensuring their safety, without interfering in their games. When Jessica accidentally scraped her knee on the playground equipment, Max immediately alerted Sarah by running to the house and barking. He then returned to Jessica's side, offering gentle kisses and comfort until Sarah arrived with bandages and ice cream. It was clear that Max's protective instincts extended beyond just Emma to anyone she cared about. The neighborhood slowly began to warm up to Max as word spread about his gentle nature. Initially, other dog owners crossed the street when they saw Sarah walking him, but Max's calm demeanor and perfect leash manners gradually won people over. Mrs. Chen, the elderly neighbor who had initially complained about having a dangerous breed on the street, became one of Max's biggest advocates after he helped her find her escaped cat. As weeks turned into months, Max's confidence grew along with his trust in his new family. He learned the household routines, knowing exactly when Emma's school bus would arrive and positioning himself by the front window 10 minutes early. His tail would begin wagging the moment he heard the familiar rumble of the bus engine, and he would dance with excitement until Emma walked through the front door. The transformation was remarkable to witness. The broken, scared dog who had cowered in the shelter was becoming a confident, joyful companion who lived for the simple pleasures of family life. He mastered basic commands with surprising speed, eager to please and desperate to prove himself worthy of the love he was receiving. Sarah began documenting Max's progress with photos and videos, amazed by how quickly he was adapting to his new life. She shared these updates with Mrs. Patterson at the shelter, who cried happy tears every time she received news about Max's happiness. The old volunteer had seen too many dogs leave the shelter only to be returned, but she knew from Sarah's reports that Max had truly found his forever home. The biggest surprise came when Emma developed a mild case of the flu and had to stay home from school for 3 days. Max never left her side, bringing her his favorite toys and resting his massive head on her small bed. He seemed to understand that his little human wasn't feeling well, and he took his role as caretaker very seriously, even refusing his own meals until Emma was feeling better enough to join him in the kitchen. 3 months into his new life, Max had settled into a routine that revolved entirely around Emma's schedule. He woke up each morning when her alarm clock rang, padding softly into her room to provide gentle wake-up kisses. He would sit patiently while she got dressed for school, his tail wagging encouragingly when she struggled with difficult buttons or tangled shoelaces. The morning ritual became so ingrained that even on weekends, Max would appear at Emma's bedside at exactly 7 o'clock, confused when she tried to sleep in. Sarah often found them having whispered conversations in the early morning light, with Emma explaining the concept of Saturday, while Max listened with the patient attention of a devoted friend. Max's protective instincts grew stronger each day, but they manifested in the gentlest ways imaginable. When Emma played in the backyard, he would position himself between her and the street, creating a living barrier of love and vigilance. If she ventured too close to the garden pond, he would gently nudge her back toward safer ground with his massive head. The neighborhood children gradually overcame their initial fear of Max's imposing appearance. Emma proudly introduced him to each new friend, explaining that despite his scary looks, Max was actually the kindest dog in the world. Soon, the Martinez backyard became the favorite gathering spot for the local kids, with Max serving as both entertainment and security. One particular afternoon, 5-year-old Tommy from next door was visiting when he accidentally kicked his ball over the fence into the neighbor's yard. The yard belonged to Mr. Jameson, a grumpy old man who had a reputation for keeping any toys that landed on his property. Tommy began to cry, knowing his mother couldn't afford to replace his favorite soccer ball. Max watched the situation unfold with growing concern. He approached the fence separating the yards and began digging carefully beneath the wooden barrier. Within minutes, he had created a small tunnel just large enough for him to squeeze through. The children watched in amazement as Max retrieved the ball and brought it back through his makeshift doggy door, dropping it gently at Tommy's feet. Word of Max's heroic ball rescue spread throughout the neighborhood, adding to his growing reputation as the gentle giant who looked out for all the local children. Parents who had initially been nervous about their kids playing near such a large dog began to see him as an additional layer of protection, a 4-legged guardian angel watching over their precious ones. Emma's confidence grew alongside her bond with Max. The shy little girl who had once been afraid to speak up in class became more outgoing, often regaling her classmates with stories of Max's latest adventures. Her teacher noticed the positive change and mentioned to Sarah, during a parent conference, that Emma seemed happier and more self-assured than ever before. The true test of Max's devotion came during Emma's 8th birthday party. Sarah had invited 12 children from Emma's class, and the backyard was filled with excited voices and birthday party chaos. Max could have easily been overwhelmed by the noise and energy, but instead he seemed to thrive in his role as party supervisor. He patiently wore the silly party hat Emma placed on his head, posed for countless photos, and even participated in a game of musical chairs by sitting whenever the music stopped. When little Amy spilled juice on her dress and started crying, Max immediately went to her side, offering comfort until Sarah could help clean up the mess. The party's highlight came when Emma opened her gifts. Among the dolls and games was a special present from Sarah, a matching collar and leash set in Emma's favorite shade of purple. As Emma fastened the new collar around Max's neck, She declared that now everyone would know they belonged together forever. That night, as Sarah was cleaning up the party decorations, she found Max in his usual spot on Emma's bed. But this time was different. Instead of lying at the foot of the bed as he normally did, Max had somehow maneuvered himself to lie directly beside Emma, his large body curled protectively around her small frame. His massive head rested on the pillow next to hers, and one of his paws was gently placed over her hand. Sarah stood in the doorway, struck by the incredible transformation she was witnessing. The dog who had been too scared to trust, too broken to hope, was now the devoted guardian of her most precious treasure. It was clear that Max had made an unspoken vow to protect Emma with his life, and nothing in the world would make him break that promise. The next morning brought an unexpected challenge when Emma woke up complaining of a sore throat and mild fever. Sarah called in sick to work so she could stay home and care for her daughter, but it quickly became apparent that Max had no intention of leaving his post either. He planted himself firmly beside Emma's bed and refused to move, even when Sarah tried to coax him outside for his morning walk. Max seemed to have an instinct for illness that amazed Sarah. He rested his head gently on Emma's forehead as if checking her temperature, and he barely touched his own food, too worried about his little human to think about his own needs. When the doctor made a house call that afternoon, Max watched every move with protective intensity, only relaxing when the physician declared Emma's illness to be nothing more than a common cold. Throughout Emma's recovery, Max never wavered in his dedication. He brought her his favorite squeaky toy to cheer her up, sat quietly during cartoon marathons, and even learned to fetch tissues when Emma sneezed. By the time she was feeling better 3 days later, their bond had deepened to a level that seemed almost telepathic. Sarah realized that Max had found his true calling as Emma's constant companion and protector. What had started as a rescue had evolved into something much more profound, a connection that transcended the typical pet-owner relationship and entered the realm of true friendship. Max had finally found his purpose in life, and that purpose had a name: Emma. The seasons changed from summer to fall, and with them came new challenges that would test the strength of Max and Emma's extraordinary bond. Emma started 3rd grade with increased homework responsibilities and after-school activities that kept her away from home longer than before. Max struggled with these extended separations, spending his afternoons lying by the front door, occasionally whimpering as he waited for his little human to return. Sarah noticed Max's distress and tried various solutions. She left worn pieces of Emma's clothing near his bed so he could have her comforting scent, played recordings of Emma reading stories to keep him calm, and even arranged for neighborhood kids to visit during Emma's longest absences. But nothing could truly replace Emma's presence in Max's world. The breakthrough came when Sarah discovered that Max responded well to routine and predictability. She created a detailed schedule that Max could somehow sense and understand. Every day at 2:30, exactly 30 minutes before Emma's bus arrived, Max would position himself at the living room window. His internal clock had become so accurate that Sarah began using his behavior to check the time. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, assigned a special project that would change everything. Each student had to write and illustrate a story about someone important in their life. While other children chose grandparents or siblings, Emma immediately knew her story would be about Max. She spent weeks crafting the perfect tale, complete with colorful drawings that showed Max's transformation from a sad shelter dog to her beloved protector. When Emma presented her story to the class titled "My Dog Max, the Gentle Giant," something magical happened. The children, who had only heard Emma's enthusiastic descriptions, finally understood the depth of her relationship with Max. Her vivid storytelling painted a picture of a dog whose love knew no boundaries, whose loyalty was absolute, and whose gentle heart contradicted every stereotype about his breed. Mrs. Rodriguez was so moved by Emma's presentation that she arranged for Max to visit the classroom as a special guest. Sarah was nervous about bringing Max to school, worried about how he would react to 28 excited 8-year-olds in an unfamiliar environment. But Max seemed to understand the importance of the occasion, walking calmly beside Emma as she proudly introduced him to each of her classmates. The visit was a triumph beyond Sarah's wildest expectations. Max sat patiently while children petted him, answered to his name when Emma called him, and even demonstrated some of his basic tricks. When quiet little Marcus, who rarely spoke in class, whispered that he was afraid of dogs, Max seemed to sense his fear and approached slowly, lying down to make himself less intimidating, until the boy felt brave enough to touch his soft fur. The success of the school visit led to invitations for Max to participate in other community events. The local library asked if Max could be part of their reading program, where children could practice reading aloud to a patient, non-judgmental listener. The therapy dog coordinator was initially skeptical about using a Pitbull, but Max's gentle demeanor and Emma's advocacy convinced them to give him a chance. Max's first day as a reading companion was scheduled for a Saturday morning in October. Sarah and Emma arrived early to help him get comfortable in the library's children's section. Emma had spent the previous week preparing Max for his new role, reading to him every night and teaching him to sit quietly while she turned pages. The first child to read to Max was a shy kindergartner named Sophia, who struggled with confidence. Her grandmother explained that Sophia was embarrassed about her reading level and often refused to read aloud at home. But something about Max's patient presence and gentle eyes encouraged her to try. As Sophia stumbled through a simple picture book about friendship, Max lay perfectly still, occasionally tilting his head as if he was truly listening to every word. By the end of Sophia's reading session, she was beaming with pride. She hugged Max goodbye and asked her grandmother if they could come back next week. Word spread quickly through the community about the gentle Pitbull who helped children discover the joy of reading, and soon the library had a waiting list of young readers eager to share their stories with Max. Emma glowed with pride as she watched Max work with other children. She had always known her dog was special, but seeing others recognize his gentle spirit validated everything she felt about their bond. Max seemed to understand that he was representing not just himself, but all dogs of his breed, and he took his responsibility seriously. The reading program created unexpected friendships for both Max and Emma. Children who attended the Saturday sessions began asking Emma about Max at school, and she found herself surrounded by new friends who shared her love of animals. Her confidence continued to grow as she became known as the girl with the amazing dog, rather than the shy student she had once been. One particularly memorable Saturday, a little boy named David arrived at the library in tears. His parents had recently divorced, and he was struggling with anger and sadness that made it difficult to concentrate on schoolwork. His mother hoped that reading to Max might provide some comfort and distraction from his troubles at home. David chose a book about a lost puppy finding his way home, and as he read aloud, his voice began to crack with emotion. Max seemed to sense the boy's pain and slowly moved closer, eventually resting his massive head on David's lap. The simple gesture opened floodgates of emotion, and David found himself telling Max all about his fears and sadness while gently stroking the dog's fur. From that day forward, David became one of Max's most dedicated reading partners. His mother reported that the weekly sessions with Max had helped her son process his emotions and regain his love of learning. The bond between boy and dog became so strong that David began referring to Max as his furry therapist, a title that made Emma giggle with delight. As autumn turned to winter, Max's reputation as a community helper continued to grow. The local newspaper wrote a feature story about the former shelter dog who had become a beacon of hope for children struggling with reading and emotional challenges. The article included a photo of Max lying beside Emma as she read him a bedtime story, capturing the pure love and trust that defined their relationship. But perhaps the most significant change was in Max himself. The broken, fearful dog who had once cowered in a shelter kennel had blossomed into a confident, purpose-driven companion whose very presence brought comfort to those around him. He had found his calling not just as Emma's protector, but as a gentle ambassador for his misunderstood breed, proving that love and patience could overcome any prejudice. Winter brought unexpected challenges that would test Max's unwavering devotion to Emma in ways no one could have predicted. It started with a series of nightmares that plagued Emma for several weeks. She would wake up crying, calling for her mother, but it was always Max who arrived first, bounding up the stairs with protective urgency to comfort his distressed little human. Sarah initially tried to encourage Max to sleep downstairs in his own bed, worried that having a 75-pound dog in Emma's small room every night wasn't practical. But Emma's nightmares seemed to disappear completely when Max was nearby, and the peaceful nights that followed convinced Sarah that this sleeping arrangement was more than just comfort. It was necessity. Max's presence had become so essential to Emma's sense of security that she could no longer imagine bedtime without him. The big dog had developed his own nighttime routine, checking all the doors and windows before settling onto his designated spot on Emma's bed. He would wait patiently until she was fast asleep before allowing himself to rest, and he would wake instantly if she stirred during the night. The depth of their connection became evident during a particularly severe snowstorm that knocked out power to their neighborhood for 3 days. While Sarah worried about keeping the house warm and cooking meals on the camp stove, Emma seemed completely unafraid. Max had positioned himself as her personal heating system, sharing his body warmth and maintaining his protective watch even as the house grew cold and dark. When the pipes froze and burst in the basement, flooding the lower level of their home, Sarah was overwhelmed by the disaster. But Emma remained calm, sitting with Max on the couch as they watched the chaos unfold around them. She whispered to her dog that everything would be okay because they had each other, displaying a maturity and resilience that amazed her mother. The insurance company required them to move out of the house temporarily while repairs were completed. Sarah's sister offered them space in her apartment, but there was one problem: no pets allowed. The thought of separating Max from Emma, even temporarily, was unthinkable. Emma burst into tears at the suggestion, clinging to Max's neck and declaring that she would rather sleep in the car than leave him behind. Sarah spent hours on the phone, desperately searching for pet-friendly temporary housing. The few options available were either too expensive or too far from Emma's school. Just when the situation seemed hopeless, Mrs. Patterson from the animal shelter called with an unexpected solution. She had heard about their predicament through the community network and offered them the use of her guest cottage, complete with a fenced yard perfect for Max. The cottage was small but cozy, with a fireplace that Max immediately claimed as his favorite spot. Emma was delighted to discover that Mrs. Patterson had a library full of children's books, and she spent her first evening reading to Max by the warm fire, while Sarah unpacked their temporary belongings. It felt like an adventure rather than a hardship, especially with Max's comforting presence making any space feel like home. During their stay at the cottage, Emma and Max's bond deepened even further. Without the distractions of their normal routine, they had more time to simply be together. Emma taught Max new tricks, including how to bring her slippers and turn off light switches. Max seemed to delight in learning these tasks, his tail wagging with pride whenever he successfully completed a new command. Mrs. Patterson watched their interactions with knowing eyes, often commenting that she had never seen such a perfect match between a dog and child. She told Sarah stories of other shelter dogs who had found good homes, but never achieved the level of connection she witnessed between Max and Emma. It was clear that they had been meant for each other, and fate had simply taken its time bringing them together. The real test came when Emma developed a stomach virus that left her weak and feverish for several days. Max refused to leave her side, even turning away from his favorite treats when Sarah tried to tempt him outside. He seemed to understand that Emma needed him more than usual, positioning himself so she could rest her head against his warm fur while she dozed fitfully. When Emma's fever spiked dangerously high in the middle of the night, it was Max who alerted Sarah by gently but persistently nudging her awake. His unusual behavior sent Sarah rushing to Emma's room, where she found her daughter burning with fever and only semi-conscious. The quick trip to the emergency room might have been delayed if Max hadn't sensed the urgency of the situation. The doctor explained that Emma's fever could have become dangerous if left untreated much longer, and Sarah realized that Max had quite possibly saved her daughter's life. As they sat in the hospital waiting room, Max on a special permission leash beside Emma's bed, Sarah marveled at the dog's intuitive understanding of when his little human was in real trouble versus simple everyday upsets. Recovery was slow, but Max never wavered in his dedication. He brought Emma his favorite toys to cheer her up, sat patiently during medicine time, and somehow knew to be extra gentle when she was feeling her weakest. The nurses at the hospital commented that they had never seen such a devoted companion, and several asked about Max's training, amazed by his intuitive caregiving abilities. When Emma was finally well enough to return to the cottage, she insisted that Max deserved a special reward for taking such good care of her. She spent her first day of feeling better making Max a crown from construction paper and organizing a ceremony where she officially dubbed him Sir Max, protector of Emma and the bravest dog in the world. Max sat perfectly still during the ceremony, his tail wagging as Emma placed the paper crown on his massive head. Mrs. Patterson captured the moment with her camera, printing copies for Emma to keep and share with her classmates when she returned to school. The photo would become one of Emma's most treasured possessions, a reminder of the day she honored the dog who had chosen her as his most important job in the world. As winter began to give way to spring, their house was finally ready for them to move back home. Emma was excited to return to her own room, but she worried that Max might not feel as comfortable in their old space after their cozy time at the cottage. Her concerns proved unfounded when Max immediately claimed his spot on her bed, circling 3 times before settling in with a contented sigh that seemed to say he was exactly where he belonged. Spring arrived with a renewed sense of hope and new beginnings for the Martinez family. Max had now been with them for over a year, and the transformation was so complete that Sarah sometimes forgot he had ever been the scared, abandoned dog from the shelter. He had become so integral to their daily lives that neighbors often asked how Emma was doing when they saw Max without her, understanding that the two were rarely separated. The most remarkable change was in how Max had influenced Emma's development. The shy, quiet girl had blossomed into a confident young leader who organized neighborhood pet care clubs and volunteered at the animal shelter every weekend. She had found her voice through advocating for Max and dogs like him, becoming a passionate spokesperson for the misunderstood Pitbull breed. Emma's 4th-grade teacher, Mr. Williams, was so impressed by her knowledge and passion for animal welfare that he invited her to present a special report to the entire school about responsible pet ownership and breed discrimination. Emma spent weeks preparing her presentation, using Max as her visual aid and drawing from their year of adventures together to illustrate her points. The day of the presentation, Max walked beside Emma into the school auditorium with the confidence of a dog who knew he had an important job to do. 300 students and teachers watched in amazement as the gentle giant demonstrated basic commands, showed his therapy dog skills, and most importantly, proved that love and training mattered far more than breed stereotypes. When Emma finished her presentation with the story of how Max had saved her life during her fever emergency, the auditorium erupted in applause. Several teachers wiped away tears as they watched the obvious love between the girl and her dog. The principal announced that Emma and Max had inspired the school to start a new program teaching students about animal safety and responsible pet ownership. That evening, Sarah found Emma in her room writing in her diary, with Max's massive head resting on the desk beside her notebook. Emma was documenting all the ways Max had changed their lives, creating a record of their journey from that first day at the shelter to their current happiness. She told her mother that she wanted to remember every detail so she could tell her own children someday about the best dog who ever lived. Max's reputation in the community had grown to legendary status. Children from all over the neighborhood would ask their parents if they could visit Emma just for a chance to play with the famous gentle giant. Parents who had once crossed the street to avoid Max now sought him out, hoping their own children could learn from his calm, patient demeanor. The local animal shelter asked Sarah if Max could become an official ambassador for Pitbull adoption, visiting potential families to show them what proper love and training could accomplish. Max seemed to understand the importance of these visits, always on his best behavior as he demonstrated that his breed could be trusted with children when given the right environment. One particularly meaningful visit involved a family considering adopting Luna, a young Pitbull mix who had been returned twice due to minor behavioral issues. Their 10-year-old son was nervous about bringing home such a large dog, despite his parents' reassurance. When Max met the boy, he immediately sensed the child's fear and laid down to make himself less intimidating, just as he had learned to do with Emma's nervous classmates. The boy spent an hour with Max, gradually building confidence as the gentle giant patiently allowed himself to be petted and hugged. By the end of the visit, the child was convinced that pit bulls could indeed be wonderful family dogs. Luna went home with them the following week, and she thrived under their care, becoming another success story in Max's growing legacy of changing hearts and minds. As Emma's 9th birthday approached, Sarah realized that Max had given her daughter far more than companionship. He had taught her empathy, responsibility, courage, and the importance of looking beyond surface appearances to see the goodness within. Emma had grown from a timid child into a confident advocate for the voiceless, all because a shelter dog had chosen her as his person. The birthday celebration was held in their backyard, with Max wearing his special party hat and supervising the festivities as he had done the year before. But this time there was an additional guest of honor. Mrs. Patterson from the shelter had been invited to witness how far Max had come since that rainy day when Sarah first saw him cowering in kennel number 47. Mrs. Patterson brought a special gift for Max, a photo album documenting his transformation from shelter dog to community hero. The first picture showed him thin and frightened behind the kennel bars, while the last showed him surrounded by laughing children at the library reading program. As Emma flipped through the pages, she declared that Max's story was better than any fairy tale because it was real and it was theirs. That night, as the party decorations were cleaned up and the guests had gone home, Max settled into his usual spot on Emma's bed with a satisfied sigh. But instead of immediately going to sleep, he seemed restless, moving from his normal position at the foot of the bed to curl up directly beside Emma, his large body forming a protective circle around her. Sarah watched from the doorway as Emma whispered her nightly secrets to Max, telling him about her dreams for the future and thanking him for being the best friend she could ever ask for. Max listened with the patient attention he had always given her, his amber eyes reflecting the love that had grown between them over the past year. As the months passed, Max's nighttime vigil became even more pronounced. He would position himself so that Emma was completely encircled by his warmth and protection, as if creating an impenetrable fortress of love around his sleeping human. Sarah often found them in the morning looking like a picture of perfect peace, with Emma's small hand resting on Max's fur and his watchful eyes still alert even in sleep. The bond had evolved beyond simple companionship into something that resembled a guardian-angel relationship. Max seemed to anticipate Emma's needs before she even expressed them, bringing her favorite stuffed animal when she was sad, alerting Sarah when Emma had forgotten her lunch money, and somehow knowing when she needed extra comfort after a difficult day at school. Emma's confidence continued to flourish under Max's constant support. She joined the school debate team, ran for student council, and started a pen pal program with children at other schools who had rescue dogs. Every achievement was celebrated with Max by her side, his presence giving her the courage to try new things and believe in herself. The most touching moment came during Emma's school's career day, when she announced that she wanted to become a veterinarian who specialized in helping shelter animals find homes. She explained to her classmates that Max had taught her that every animal deserved a chance at happiness, and she wanted to spend her life making sure no dog ever had to wait as long as Max had for a loving family. Max's influence extended beyond just Emma to touch the entire community. The neighborhood had become a more pet-friendly place, with several families adopting rescue dogs after seeing Max's success story. The local shelter reported an increase in Pitbull adoptions, directly attributing the change to Max's positive representation of the breed. One evening, as Sarah tucked Emma into bed, she asked her daughter what she thought was the most special thing about Max. Emma considered the question seriously before answering that the most amazing thing wasn't how big and strong he was, or how smart he was, or even how he had saved her from the fever. The most special thing was that he had chosen her to love, and he never changed his mind about that choice, not even for a single day. As if he understood the conversation, Max lifted his massive head from his spot beside Emma and gently licked her face, earning a giggle that filled the room with joy. Sarah realized that what she was witnessing wasn't just a girl and her dog, but a perfect example of unconditional love in its purest form. The story of Max and Emma had become legend in their small community, proof that sometimes the most unlikely friendships create the strongest bonds. Max had found his forever home, but more importantly, he had found his purpose, to love and protect the little girl who had seen past his fearsome exterior to the gentle heart within. Every night, as Emma drifted off to sleep with Max's steady breathing beside her, she knew with absolute certainty that she was safe, loved, and protected by the best friend anyone could ever have. And Max, the former shelter dog who had once given up hope of finding a family, slept peacefully knowing that he had found his place in the world. He was exactly where he belonged, and nothing would ever change that truth. His vigil would continue for as long as Emma needed him, because that was what love looked like, and Max was a master of love.